Hello and welcome back to the Whiskey Uncorked podcast. My name is Brian. I'll be your host today, and with me, my co-host Kevin, who
Hello.
has been helping me out with these podcast style videos, which are now live on all of the major podcast networks. If you're listening to this on one of those podcast networks, you can find more content from me on YouTube under Whiskey Uncorked, whiskey with no E, where you can find some of my uh, whiskey reviews, and about half of which contains some longer form conversations. But Kevin, how have you been? How's it going?
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. You just got back from a quick little 3 day mini almost staycation with the family, and then before that, I was sick for about a week. But finally home, starting to feel a little well rested, starting to feel better, and looking to looking to move forward and let's tackle some of this whiskey stuff.
You drinking anything good tonight?
Yeah, I've got a couple poured. Both of them are going to be in my top 10 distilleries, which we'll be discussing shortly. And I'll kind of give you some more information about them then. But yeah, I've got a couple poured.
All right. Well, for me, what I've got poured is not. It's not even Scotch. It's the Injury Trini,
Ooh,
which I have been really enjoying ever since
oh,
I
nice.
opened it. And realistically, if I had drank more of it last year before the end of the year, like I probably could have been a run in the contendership for whiskey of the year just based on
Oh
A,
wow,
how surprised I was, B, it's relatively affordable, and C, I really like it. So
nice. Wasn't sure
yeah,
what you were going to think of that one, so that's awesome. Yeah, I like that stuff too. That is definitely when I heard about it and I was able to actually find a bottle in the wild. It was shocking.
yeah, the fruitiness on it is delicious.
Yeah.
But all right, well, I guess in terms of agenda for this particular episode, we kind of wanted to do a post-mortem wrap up, semi deeper conversation in regards to what we spent the last 9 hours or so, something like that, talking about on the podcast, and that is the Dramface top 40 Scotch distilleries as
Yeah.
voted on by their readers. So, if you're not familiar, you're finding us without listening to that, dramface.com. It's an independent website where primarily focused on whiskey reviews, whiskey articles who are written by pretty much anybody, and they're all posted under pseudonyms so that people who may have some sort of reputation to maintain can kind of post freely um, without kind of revealing who they are, industry people, that sort of thing. It was started by Roy at Aquavite, the Aquavite channel, who is primarily known for the VPub. So him and some of his associates started up the website a couple years back now, I think.
Yep.
And so Roy had started this top 40 thing as part of his channel, and then he has more recently passed it off to the website so that it's exposed to a larger audience, and so the larger team can work on marketing it and everything like that. So currently, the data we're working off of is about 1,000 votes or 1,000 ballots, and those ballots consist of people's top 10 Scotch whiskey distilleries in no particular order. So, as we've mentioned a bunch of times, I'll just say it here again for the new people. The rankings were based on the tally of how many ballots a distillery appeared on, and it did pretty well. There was a couple interesting results here and there, and it's impossible for us to tell exactly uh,
Right.
how that all played out. I'm sure Roy's generally pretty transparent about that stuff. If you were really upset or something, you could ask him for, or a Dram Face, you could ask them for the data, and I'm pretty sure they'd probably let you have it. Well, they'd have to clean out people's email addresses and stuff, I'm sure. But
Yeah.
you can go in there, vote now. You can vote anytime. You can update your votes whenever you want. They're tied to your Gmail address. And every once in a while, they're going to take a new snapshot, which it sounds like they're planning on doing pretty soon. So we may have an update to talk about. If there's no drastic changes and everything's pretty much the same, then maybe we'll skip it. But anyways, I thought there was a few other topics that we could kind of talk about in terms of how we view the usefulness of this, what our opinions are on, like what are our top tens,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I think there's a few debatable points, there's a few interesting points, and
Absolutely.
you and I haven't discussed a ton of our opinions other than what we talked about during the
Yeah.
other episodes, so it could be a little bit interesting. But there was another section here on the ballot that we didn't really touch on, and that was which motivators did you prioritize when choosing your favorites? And you're allowed to pick up to 3. Just to run through them, their quality of liquid, flavor, branding, price and value, natural presentation, meaning natural filtered, natural color, visitor experience, availability, philosophy, location, loyalty, emotion, people, meaning the team and staff of the distillery, and then attitude. Some of those I kind of have to interpret based on what I think they mean, but
Mhm.
you don't have to go off this list necessarily. But did you have primary motivating factors between for the distilleries that you had in your top 10? And is that consistent across all top 10, I guess?
Well, I would say like this is an interesting question because I kind of have a hard time
It is hard.
coming to terms with like you're not voting for flavor / quality, like the actual experience you get from the like that has to be based in
Okay.
some sort of importance.
Yeah, I'm assuming
Guidelines
that
or metric,
flavor and quality of
right?
liquid have to be. I'm
Like,
not sure why those are separated. It seems like those could be the same thing, but I can see why
yeah, like
they're different.
so like I can see, um, let's just take Springbank for example. They have that sort of small homegrown, you know, everything's hands on deck. There's not very much technology. It's all very kind of almost farm like in sort of how they're run. That can be a bonus for you, right? If you
Mhm.
kind of want to value that,
Yeah.
that kind of almost traditional approach. But
Mhm.
to like select that here, like I don't know that because of that one distillery and you like that to list that as like a primary motivator. I don't know. It just seems weird when it's like just I like this distillery because they do this.
Yeah.
Or like I think it's ultimately going to be based in the quality of the liquid and the flavor. But you can be like I like this distillery because of because they're environmentally friendly, and
Mhm.
I like this distillery because they have a cool visitor center or whatever.
Mhm.
But to say I'm ranking these distilleries based on I don't know their visitor experience, like it doesn't make any like no one's doing that. Like no one's saying Springbank's visitor experience isn't as good as like Glenlivet's, so they're ranking Glenlivet higher. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. So
Yeah.
like this just feels like a weird amalgamation of flavor, and then you can find things you like or don't like from distillery to distillery, as opposed to like ranking them all on some weird metric that doesn't really have anything to do with the whiskey.
Yeah, I definitely get where you're coming from. Maybe the one caveat is if you live in Scotland and you spend a lot of times at the distilleries, and that you can have a more personal connection with some of them if they're part of your town, or if that's your main
Yeah,
thing that you do.
which I think they do cover with location, right? Location to me would mean
Well,
like
yeah, location, location, people, and staff. Um, I mean, loyalty, a visitor experience loyalty is kind of a somewhat of a weird one, but um, I mean, the other one that probably most people voted on, or probably a whole heck of a lot of people that voted in this poll, is price and value.
Price and value, sure, yeah,
Which,
yeah,
I mean, you can argue, hey, obviously that might have affected your ability to actually try some of these distilleries,
hmm
um, or because it's interesting because maybe their 10-year-old is a good value, but then things get a little crazy
yeah,
up
absolutely.
higher, and maybe if someone else can taste those more expensive or older expressions. For me, I can't taste all of them, but I can
Mhm.
I can taste some of them. I've been going through these 18-year-old single malts, which, I mean, hey, a lot of people, some of those bottles are just they're not willing to or unable to, uh, spend that much money on a bottle of whiskey. So that can even affect just their entire perception of a distillery, even if maybe they're not mad at what it costs, they just can't swing it. So, but yeah, I'm with you. I mean, quality for me, what's it like when I drink it? Even some of the other things like natural presentation
Yeah,
and that sort of thing. Like, okay, if the distillery is going out of their way to pump pollutants into the air, they're just like just some evil corporation that's
mhm,
I mean, some people might argue that. I mean, some people say that they are with the peat and everything, but um, just these black smokestacks of whatever, just polluting the sky. Okay, maybe that's enough to make you hate them so much that you refuse to vote for them, even if maybe they make the best whiskey possible. But
yeah.
uh, yeah, flavor number one easily. Other than that, I don't really care. Price and value, obviously, that's going to
Price and
come from that.
values, I think, probably in that category because you know, I think if Macallan was $80, was standard pricing, it'd probably be in the list,
Yeah,
even if it's still chill filtered and stuff. If you could
yeah,
buy it for like, $60 a bottle or whatever, it'd probably still be in the top 40.
yeah,
Um, maybe not at the top tier, but I think it was revealed on one of the V pubs that like in the first ranking, Macallan was like in the 60s or 70s or something like that. So,
yeah.
which seems we can talk
Well,
about that.
Yeah, and McAllen has such a like they have that bad guy vibe to some of the whiskey
Yeah,
community. I don't, you can say that they deserve it. I mean, it's mostly based on their pricing
yeah,
and just their exploitation of things, I guess. Just of
yeah.
people, of a reputation that they gained decades ago that they haven't lived up to in like a long time.
hmm
Apparently, I don't know. I'm not a big Macallan drinker. What I've
hmm
had from them has been fine.
Yeah,
Um, but anyway, yeah, I mean, philosophy, as you mentioned, I mean, attitude. I'm not sure if that's just like how they interact with the
yeah, yeah.
community or something,
I don't even know what attitude means. Loyalty seems like another weird one
or it's
because
just yeah, you just have
because
brand
when
loyalty.
because I'm like, why are you? But then why are you loyal? Like, and then you can point back to these other things. So like that
W-
seems interesting to me.
Well,
Um,
yeah, and it could be. I mean,
but you're loyal
some people
because
don't know
of
why they're loyal. It's just people who are loyal to Bud Light or Budweiser or something in the U.S. They don't necessarily. That's just their beer that they drink. They define their personality by the beer that they drink, and doesn't mean it's good, but
oh,
they think
absolutely.
it's good.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
all right, yeah, I mean, I could see like, I mean, obviously, an individual can just feel something is very important. Um, Maybe you like collecting distilleries based on their packaging and ornate bottles and that sort of thing, and the branding part of it is important to you. But yeah, I think for us and probably most people, flavor, quality of liquid, and price and value are probably number one. Now they didn't give us any information about what people voted on for this, which
No,
is hopefully they start doing that. That'll be interesting. But um,
I
okay,
think
well with
I
go ahead.
think in that initial reveal VPub, Roy did break down the pre-dram face vote.
Mm,
So you could maybe go back to that and get some information. But yeah, the Dram Face release, they've not done anything like that.
All right, we'll submit a request then. I mean, hopefully, I mean, maybe they added it afterwards. Who knows? All right. Well, now that we kind of know motivation, seems like we're probably mostly on point. Do you want to like reveal? So we don't have any fancy graphics or anything, so this
No.
is. But yeah, I don't know. What do you you want to go
Well,
through your top 10?
yeah, we can just start with that. You can either start with that or surprises. Maybe I was kind of
Okay.
maybe thinking surprises. Might
Okay. Yeah,
be
we can do that. That's fine. Yeah. There's really. I mean, I was thinking about this. There's one that I'm surprised about that isn't on the list.
that isn't. So surprised is not on the list.
Yeah, I mean that's the easy one. And you can debate maybe some that might make it. And yeah, I mean I can debate. Um, Here, let me bring this page up so I can
Yeah, and
actually.
especially if you watch the earlier episodes, I think we kind of talked about our surprises on the list as we
Yeah,
kind of went along too. So we'll go over that, but maybe briefly.
yeah. I felt like so. Anyways, the way I was trying to organize them in my head is there's a couple that I'm surprised aren't on the list, and the reason I'm
Okay.
surprised is because they do things at least to some degree. 46% natural presentation. Maybe not for all of their products, but at least some of
Mhm.
them. And their pricing isn't necessarily ridiculous. In fact, one of them is relatively considered a budget one. And but then there's some other ones that I felt kind of similar to like Ben Rennis and Linkwood, some of these kind of more silent distilleries or just not well known distilleries
Sure.
that are popular just in the independent bottling ring could eventually make it up, but they're not necessarily surprises. But yeah, I mean, Spaburn's probably got to be the one I'm most surprised at not being on the list because, especially that the 15-year-old, I think it seems like the 18 is kind of not really much of a budget option anymore. Um,
Hmm.
but the 15 is still like $70 or $75, heavily sherried, 46% non-chill filtered, all that stuff. And the price has creeped up a little bit, maybe $10 or so in the last couple of years. But um, I like Spayburn 15. It's not really my style of whiskey, although I kind of referenced it in my Tomaten review. Um, it is pretty good. It's just not the style that I'm reaching for all the time these days. But um, what do you think about that one?
Yeah, no, that's on my surprises list as well, especially just considering the source of the list. Um,
Yeah,
they talk about Spayburn a lot, especially the 15. That's almost become a joke at this point, kind of how much how much they love the 15. Um, so yeah, and so I'm definitely surprised it wasn't anywhere on the list. I'm kind of in the same boat as you, although I have the 18 and I really enjoy that. I have not bought a 15 yet. I just haven't, at least around here in Chicago. I only see like the 10 and the budget, the NAS one. I haven't actually seen either the 15 or the 18 on the shelf.
yeah, they're
So,
pretty. It's pretty sporadic in terms of availability. I've noticed
so,
that as well.
so I went out of my way to order a bottle of Spayburn, and then at least at the time, the 18 seemed like as a pretty good value. So I went with that over the 15. But no, I really like it. I believe the 18 is more sherried. Well, at least I know the 15s have gotten darker, so maybe that's not true anymore.
Yeah, the
Um,
15 is pretty sherry.
yeah, yeah. The early ones, at least when they started getting bigger, it wasn't quite as dark. So I still have it in my head a little bit that the 18 is more sherried, but yeah, I know the 15 is as well now, especially lately. Yeah, no, that's definitely a surprise, especially with some of the buzz it's gotten in some of the corners of the internet.
It
And
might be. I mean, it might be a good example of why, because it's big on the VPub. Roy has gone
mhm,
through periods where he's talked about it a lot,
yeah,
and obviously him being kind of the progenitor of the list and Dram Face and all that sort of thing. It could be a sign that with because it didn't drop off the list, so it wasn't on the initial vote, and
mhm,
maybe
no,
he didn't start talking about Spayburn until after this was the thing. But um, Yeah, given its affordability and its generally perceived quality, this must just be an example that maybe either A, it's not as beloved as some channels might have you believe it is, and B, uh, it's maybe this isn't as focused of a vote anymore, which is good. Which
Mm,
is a good thing. Which is a
yeah,
good thing. But
absolutely.
any? Did you have a surprise other than Spayburn?
Yeah, I had two other ones. One is more than the other, and even then, it's we can talk about it. The one I would say that I was most surprised isn't anywhere in the top 40, but I think I can justify why it's not. Is Lag.
Hmm.
Lag Distillery. It's a new up and coming distillery from La Cranza, or Aaron, as
Yeah.
more commonly referred to. I want to say they're about 6 or 7 years old, somewhere in that range. Maybe that sounds about right. But they're heavily peated, at least so far, often sherried releases. I know that they've only been kind of releasing product for like a year and a half now, which was just kind of probably my reason for it not being on this showing up yet. But
Yeah.
it's another one of those new distilleries. It's heavily peated and sherried, so it's got a lot of character up front. People have been raving and ranting about it. Um, Now, one sort of asterisk to this is I have not tasted any lag yet, and neither have you, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
Um,
No, it's not available here. I think
which,
we might have talked about it at some point, but it's probably
yeah,
the one young distillery that's out there right now that I would be willing to buy a bottle of, but
yeah,
I'm not going to pay the extra fees to have it shipped over.
have it shipped over here. Yeah, but no, it's just like the type of buzz I hear from it, and watching reviews and stuff. Um, it's kind of one that I would have maybe thought would have. Again, it's still kind of expanding its availability, but I kind of would have guessed it would be in the 30s or low 20s, maybe even by now.
Yeah.
Just based on the kind
Mhm.
of things you hear about it. Again, it's all naturally presented. Actually, a lot of their releases are even higher, than 46. They have a lot of cask strength type stuff. So, yeah, I was a bit surprised that that's not on the list, instead of some of those somewhat silent distilleries.
Yeah, and then you have Dornock on the list, which we spent some time talking about.
Exactly.
Who really hasn't? They have released whiskey up to this point. They're an extremely small distillery.
Yeah.
They only I just saw they had another. I got an email for another ballot. They're doing another batch release. I think they've released some bottles through like whiskey festivals and things, but very limited. So, but they're on the list, and so they're owned by the Thompson brothers, and so our assumption is that it was the Thompson brothers that made the top 40, not necessarily
Dornick.
Dornock, and they have
Yeah.
been rewarded for their independent bottlings and their blending line that they've been doing, and they've been doing really well at.
Yeah, because
So
there's way more lag whiskey out there than there's
yeah,
Dornick whiskey.
yeah,
So,
it seems to just be available. Like you can just go on
mhm,
the UK shops and you can grab them, and they're not crazy expensive. They're
yeah.
like most new distilleries, they're probably a little more than you'd like to pay, but
Mhm.
you get it. They're you- it's not I don't think it's a massive distillery, but it's I'd have to check the capacity. But yeah, it's available. I think it's relatively affordable and everything. Like you said, everything
Mhm.
I've heard is it's pretty good, and it's supposed to be just a real heavy, sooty, dirty
Yep.
heat bomb. And those are it was enough to interest me. I think really oily. I think it was described as well.
Yeah, I'm,
I would
I'm
I would
super excited to get lag,
yeah.
to get something. So I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, definitely a surprise here. And to a lesser degree, maybe some of the other new distilleries, Torvig, Luckily, that kind of stuff. Again, I know that maybe they're not getting the buzz that some of the other ones are, but still, you kind of have those people who latch onto these things and
Mhm.
want to promote their baby, or their pet distillery. So people kind of like to get on the ground floor of some of these things. So, again, I would have expected maybe a couple more new distilleries, kind of in that 30s range.
Mhm.
Um, maybe over. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy like Ben Rennis and Linkwood and stuff made it, because I love those distilleries. But yeah, I would have maybe expected some more new names on there, considering where some
Mm,
of these
I
distilleries are in their release cycle.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's kind of interesting to see because we have Ardemarken, which is all the way up at number 2, and then we don't really have another one until Isle of Raasay
Yeah, and I
at number
think
32,
and then was that it for new for
and
like
then
brand, for
Dornoch,
brand new and Dornick.
which
Um, but
but
yeah,
those are the only new distilleries, and they're again in that case those are kind of the ones that have gotten some buzz around kind of this dram phase v pub sort of uh,
corner of the internet.
corner of the whiskey community. So, I have had Isle of Raasay. I have the one bottle, and not going to run out and buy another one yet. Not that I thought it was bad. I'm enjoying
Mhm.
it, but I got what I wanted out of it. The Ardemarken, we talked about that a lot in the most recent version. Big fan of Ardemarken. Big question as to whether it's a top 10 distillery, but again, it's okay that it's there. I'm not mad, but it is interesting, like the ones that have been kind of selected by the the
Yeah,
community, and given that one of them it probably has not been voted on um,
quite
because of
honest. Yeah,
the whiskey yet. I have
honestly,
no doubt it's good.
put it that way. Yeah, absolutely. And then this one just kind of. I do have one more. Surprised is maybe the wrong word. I think it's mostly just an interesting. Actually, I'm actually kind of doubting myself now. Hold on, let me go make. Okay, I'll just mention it.
I can
Um,
go. I can go. I've got one.
no, okay, yeah, go ahead. Let me make sure it's not on the list before I say that it's not on the list. Go ahead.
So there's another one of these distilleries. Again, I'm not surprised that it's not on the list because it's just some, in my opinion, stunning distillery that just absolutely needs more attention.
Hmm.
But I think at one point, especially when I was first getting in
Yeah.
to Scotch whiskey, it absolutely seemed like one that would probably have been on the list, and that's Glenmorangie.
Okay.
Because again, they're another distillery that, yes, I think like the 10 and their 18 are not 46% because they have the 12 the La Santa, they have the Quinta Ruban, which is the 14 port, then they have the Nectar d'Or, which is the Sauternes cask, and then they have some other stuff like the Tales of series that they've been
Yeah.
doing. Those are all 46%. Obviously, Glenmorangie kind of made its name, kind of pushing forward the idea of finishing whiskeys and double casking or double maturation, however you want to look at it. And there was one time when especially the 14, the Quinta Ruban, was really viewed as a fantastic value. They're all pretty fairly priced. So the fact that it's right, you have like Glenfarclas that's on here, and again, I understand why it is, but Ball Blair, uh, there's definitely room for Glenmorangie to be on the list
Hmm.
because I think like Glenfarclas, Ball Blair, right, similar-ish kind of vibe to them, at least from my perspective. But yeah, it just seems like an outlier it's out of fashion. People are mad that the 14 is not as good as it used to be. But I hear the 10 is actually supposed to be pretty good, even at like 40%. And
Yeah. And if I had to kind of give a guess, I would think that the 10 is such an almost like iconic 40% sort of starter whiskey
mhm.
that that's kind of just the perception people have of it. Uh, and like even though you like they have these kind of ascending releases, some of them I think are 43, right? Some like those the core range.
The 10 and the 18 is
And 18,
the 18 is 43.
okay.
And I think the
Um,
21 goes back up to 46. So it's kind of this weird
yeah.
thing. I don't know.
And then I know that there's some special releases and stuff, but yeah, you're right. It is for a distillery that does do a lot of natural presentation. They don't get any enthusiast discussion almost at all.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
it's pretty rare. They did. I was just looking before this, and they released a 15-year-old 2023 card ball edition or something like that. It's a blue label.
the Estates one, Cardball Estates or whatever it is.
Yeah, that one's 43% for some reason. Um,
Okay.
maybe that's it. Maybe they just are kind of waffling. And like I said, it seems like people are actively upset at the 14. I just bought one, well, last summer, so I've been kind of going through it a little bit. It'll probably be a review at some point, and I like it. It's not bad, but um, it's a good introduction to port. But yeah, anyways, it was just one of these that I was kind of surprised because they're.
Do their 46% say non-chill filtered on them? I'm just curious.
I doubt it. I can
Okay.
check.
So, and I'm actually going to use that as a segue then, because one of the other distilleries that I could have seen on the list, and like I said, I'm not surprised necessarily, but Benriach.
It does say non-chill filtered on
Does
the
it?
back.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and so almost then maybe compared to that is like Benriach, which again, I think the youngest one is 43%, but I think most of their line is 46%. But none of them say non-chill filtered, which drinking Benriach, I could see it being chill filtered despite being 46%, which
Yeah, they're
if you
another
look,
Brown Foreman. It's Brown
but if
Foreman, right?
you
They own Glendronach, who doing the same thing,
yeah.
infamously.
But like, yeah, I mean, I've had a couple bottles of Benriach. It's really good. You're right. It does taste pretty. So like it's certainly not a hefty beast by any stretch. Um, but it is a little bit of a higher bump still. It's still 46%. But yeah, if they are being chill filtered, I could see that being a reason. That's something that's keeping them off the list. But yeah, especially because considering some of these other things that did make the list, I'm a little surprised
Yeah,
it's again not kind of on that edge, or maybe even if it had gotten knocked off. I think there were those 4 distilleries that
yeah.
got pushed off. It's not even in that group, so like I'm a little surprised it's not in the top 45. Just because their stuff is pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, I don't have any complaints about. I'm not like the fact that it's not on there. Not mad about it or anything, but it just felt like one that maybe kind of people forget about. But did you sort out the other one that you?
Yeah, that was it was Benriach. I
Oh,
uh,
Benriach. I
I,
got you.
I had a momentary glimpse of maybe it was barely on the list, but
Yeah, I think
I
in
think
my
I,
mind it was. If you would
I
have
think
asked me,
I was thinking of one of the other ones. So no, it was not on the list. So
yeah, Benriach, I can see. I know I did the review of the Smoky 12. It's a
mm,
bottle that the more I drank it, the less I liked it for whatever reason. But I've had really great experiences with it,
mm,
and again, I think Benriach makes pretty good whiskey overall. And
yeah,
yeah, like you said, a lot of it is 46%. Generally speaking, still fairly affordable. But they just, I don't know. It never quite got as hyped up as Glendronach did,
mm,
and Rachel Berry is doing both now. She's pretty well respected. People are
yep,
upset about the chill filtration thing and all that, but yeah, it kind of gets another one that kind of gets ignored, maybe unfairly. I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to start a riot over it, but
exactly.
I said there
Right.
are things are on the list that if you swap them out for Glenmorangie or Benriach, yeah, I wouldn't have batted an eye. But okay, any other, son, or are you ready to?
No, that pretty much covers my main surprise. Those two with the Speyburn. Um,
So any that you are just utterly shocked are on the list?
I mean, we covered Dornick.
Yeah.
um, Dornick, and then not necessarily that's on the list, but there's especially the placement on the list. We talked about Ardnamurchan a lot.
Mhm.
Um, one that kind of stuck out, and you actually already brought it up. I was going to bring up was Glenn Farkless's placement on the list for a distillery that, as far as I can tell, only gets hate, being in the mid 20s. Uh, it seems high.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm putting the list up
like
on the screen so people
Like
can
all
see.
of Glenn Farkless's line is 40 or 43, except for the 15 and the 105 cast or the Glenn Farkless 105. And both of those constantly get complaints about batch quality. how one bottle can be really good, and then the next one from the next batch is not even drinkable. Um, so, I don't really know if there's like a consistently well respected line at Glenfarclas right now that's like core range ish. I know like their family casks and stuff are, so that's something else though. The reputation from what I hear from reviewers and comments and all this stuff is that Glenfarclas is either tepid or it's wildly inconsistent. Still making mid-20s stands out to me.
Yeah, I completely agree, given that, like you said, they really only have those two options. I had a bottle of the 15, I was not impressed. And it's hard. We have to order it from overseas. We don't get it in the States. So it was probably one of the more disappointing bottles I've had because I had a 17 and I really liked it. So I was like, man, I'm gonna get the 46% one. I had it shipped over from the UK, probably paid extra premium, got it. And yeah, it was not particularly great. So I think I gave it a 4 out of 10. And there's not many that I think a lot of it was just straight up due to the disappointment of it probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't Glenfarclas really seems to just be an old standby maybe for a lot of other people. And uh you can get some fairly well aged whiskeys for still fairly affordable prices. But yeah, I mean, I guess maybe people generally have a better experience with the 15-year-old most of the time to keep it around. So I don't.
Yeah, that was just one that stood out to me as a not where I would expect it to be.
I don't know, because I can always find reasons in my head to have things on the list or off the list or even where they're placed. Because I was thinking, like, I know Bamore is one of your favorite distilleries, but as we kind of talked about,
Yeah,
your experience
yeah.
that has really led that is like 20-plus-year-old whiskeys for the most part. And
Yeah,
they're
or safe to say not official bottlings.
yeah, non-official bottling. Yeah.
Independence and the higher age, the better, for sure.
Yeah. So, and that's one where I think probably most people not buying because they're not cheap bottles by any stretch of the imagination, right?
No.
They're not as much as official bottlings by any stretch of the imagination, but so I was almost kind of surprised that that's almost still on the list at this point because the way you hear people talk about the core range is like it's horrible.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've never bought any, so I don't have an opinion, but just the way you hear people, and so maybe for the same reason, right? People just have or they're voting on it because they are able to get the independent bottlings and they're willing to pay for them, and that's enough for people to say, similar to like my Kleinlich and Ben Nevis explanations, that the ceiling is so high, and I know what they can make, I know what they're capable of.
Yeah,
therefore, it deserves to be on the list. I'm not saying it doesn't deserve to be on the list. It's like, man, these are diehards that are voting for it. It feels like, which I'm going to guess you're probably one of them.
And I can talk more about that in a few minutes, probably.
Sure. So other than that, like I said, you can make arguments. I was kind of surprised that Knockdhu was as low as it was, the Anok 18 in particular, although that, at least here, it's up to about $150 now. You can probably get it cheaper than that some areas. The top 10, I'm okay with. I think we kind of talked about Glen Scotia. Like, I'm not surprised it's that high, but I'm kind of surprised it's that high. For me, it's more around like 12, 15, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
But the Victoriana, I think, has really kind of turned that around. Tobermory, I just, as tomorrow morning from this recording, putting up the Lechik 10 review. Very good whiskey. That I have a bottle of the 18. You've had one. I have one, but it's in Wisconsin. I have to get it over here. And I've had a few other Lechiks. Have they done enough for long enough to be up here? Don't know. Ben Romick, entire core range, drives enthusiasts crazy, but as we talked about, they have a lot of other options for us. So you can make arguments, but for the most part, I think the list is at least arguable. Like we said, even Ardnamurchan Markin being number 2, we're both like, yeah, it's not the number 2 distillery, but it being in the top 10 isn't necessarily
Yeah.
out of line. Could have
Yeah,
a number 10.
we've talked about why we think.
Yeah, you'll have to. Yeah, you can watch that stuff if you want to hear our rants about it. But
Mhm.
I mean, I can pick up pretty much any of
I,
these and
w-
argue it could be
I
higher,
would
it could be
say
lower.
for me, I had a similar. Your Glen Scotia sentiment is kind of, and I can't even really explain why, but Loch Lomond's placement is kind of like it's in the mid teens, I believe, somewhere around there,
It is number 16.
like
Yes.
16. Like that one, again, I'm not surprised because I know that it's very accessible. There's a lot of stuff out there. Most of it's pretty well presented. Yeah, I don't know. That just feels high to me, but I really can't even explain why.
Well, I think neither of us have had.
We haven't had a lot of Loch Lomond
We haven't had
experience.
a lot of it, and the stuff that I've had, the times I've tried it or had like a tasting kit or whatever, didn't do didn't do anything. It was
Mhm.
fine and wasn't bad. But it being up around number 16 for me is difficult. I'm still waiting. Um, I should go probably make a concerted effort to try, but at the same time, I still kind of have an attitude of, well, I did try and it failed. I mean, didn't fail, but yeah, you're right. Number 16 overall, it's hard. It's hard for me. I think there was someone in our comment section saying like you should try the Loch Lomond 18. And okay, I at some point I would love to. It's definitely probably a gap, one of the bigger gaps in the list overall for me.
Yeah.
And
I mean, we kind of touched on it in that episode, but yeah, like Loch Lomond just has so much different product out there.
yeah,
Like peated, unpeated, single, triple distilled, double distilled, pot stills, columns. They have everything. So even that's like to boil it down to like a singular kind of impression. Um, I mean, maybe that's part of why I'm struggling is because
I mean,
it
and
feels
even on that note, the one right in front of it, Glenallachie, I get why it's up there, and I get people love Billy Walker, and I think Mikel Tor release and some of the stuff is helping, although this has dropped 2 spots since those came out.
Mhm.
But and it's not his fault, right? He's been re-racking poor spirit that's been in bad casks into good casks now for 10 years or however long it's been. Not quite that long. I think it's
But
2017 or something like that.
yeah, his spirit's like 5 years old, so 6 years, 7 years, something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, 2017 sounds like maybe when the transaction went through. So I don't know when he started distilling, but
Mhm.
yeah, I like Glenallachie. Just again, it's good. Like I've liked the 10-year-olds I've tried. My version of the 15 was right there next to Glenfarclas 15. It just wasn't very good. I've heard it's been getting better. But again, it's hard when you have a bad one, and it's $100 to like, oh, I'll give it a second chance when I could just try something else.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
but the 10, I wouldn't, I don't have a 10 right now. I probably should grab one. They tend to still get pretty solid reviews, but
Mhm.
yeah, on a personal, I know why it is because people are excited for it. It's got some hype behind it. They have released some pretty good product. But my experience with it does not put it at number 15 overall.
Yeah,
But
but we're also not the biggest sherry heads either. I mean,
I
in
have
terms of,
I have had good experience. That I mentioned that when we were talking about it. That PX single cast I had was phenomenal, it was delicious. So
yeah,
there
in
is.
terms of enthusiast forward sherry dominant distilleries, it's one of the better ones.
I'd rather have a Speyburn 15 over probably
Okay,
most of
okay,
their
yeah.
line. But
Sure.
yeah, other than the 10, I probably wouldn't gonna go. I'm not gonna go out of my way to
Mhm.
probably buy any of it until some of Billy's actual spirit becomes a little bit more mature. I'd like to try the Mikel Tours, but I'm not gonna go pay for them. So,
Understandable.
but all right, we're 45 minutes in here.
let's get into our top tens.
Do you want to start talking about top tens? Okay. Well,
Yeah.
the back end of my top 10 is a convoluted disaster. So I'll let you go first since you seem a little bit more confident in yours.
I'm maybe somewhat more confident, although we'll get to that. Yeah, so I would say I actually very recently redid, I re-examined my list, so to speak.
Mhm.
Doing this series and stuff. So you
I'm going
certainly
to
want.
put you on full screen for one quick second, but yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Yeah. Definitely wanted to make sure that my current top 10 was what I was thinking was my top 10. And what I think I ultimately decided is I currently have like a top 9. And I'll get to that in a second. But towards the top of my list, I can pretty much say that these are going to be in the top 5 distilleries at the moment: Springbank, Bruichladdich, Edredauer, Benromic, and to touch on something we talked about earlier, Bowmore. But that Bowmore basically just ignores that the core range exists. And but we've kind of talked about it in earlier episodes, but there's some distilleries are kind of known as our ceiling distilleries.
Mm-hmm.
These, maybe the average experience of these distilleries wouldn't get it here, but the top end experiences are just unlike, they provide experiences that other distilleries just can't. And at least for me so far, Bowmore has one of those profiles with just that dirty, tropical, just their smoke profile is so interesting to me. And just when it's like rich and big and it hits, it's one of the, for me, it's one of the unbeatable profiles out there. So Bowmore is probably my number 5. And then kind of rounding out that for the other 4, Glengyle, Blair Ethel, Ben Rinnes, and Ben Nevis. We've definitely talked about these as we went along. Again, Ben Nevis is, again, I think similar to you, one of those kind of ceiling. The amazing Ben Nevis experiences are, again, in a league of their own. I've had amazing experiences with independent Ben Rinnes and Blair Ethel bottlings. Blair Ethel's just a weird spirit to me. Blair Ethel, it just kind of stands out as this weird, like funky's are even the wrong word, but it's kind of a bizarre spirit. A lot of times, and that holds up. And that's actually is the pour I'm drinking right now. I'm drinking a Blair Ethel. It's an SMWS Insanity Dram. And Insanity Dram is a correct name for this because it is, again, a bizarre, weird experience. And I tend to like those. So
yeah, that's great, because that's probably Blair Ethel would definitely be. I could have that as like the thumbnail. Like, is Blair Ethel the best distillery in Scotland? And people are gonna,
yeah.
and I'll get angry comments saying bullshit.
Yeah. So those I'm pretty comfortable putting in my top 10. But my 10th one, I could not.
Yeah.
I've got a list of 8 honorable mentions that I think I could arguably put any of them into my top 10. I think right now, somewhat funnily enough, you kind of brought it up earlier, I've got Tobermory, I think, in that 10th spot now.
Yeah.
But the slightest suggestion, I could put Kilhome in there. I could put Kleinleash there. I could even put Ardnamurk in there, contribute to that nonsense. Daffmill, Boonahaven, Linkwood,
Yeah.
there's a lot in that 10 to 15 range that at any given night, my mood could put a different one at number 10. So I think I've got those 9 locked in: Springbank, Bruichladdich, Edredauer, Glengyle, Bowmore, Blair Ethel, Benromic, Ben Nevis, Ben Rinnes as 9. And then 10, again, right now I've got Tobermory, just because the older Lechegs and my Tobermory 17, I really enjoy those. But yeah, that'll change by the moment. I actually kind of regret it now. So,
Well, I had a pretty similar issue. We got quite a bit of overlap, which isn't surprising. But Yeah, I have a list of 16 distilleries. That doesn't include Bamore, and even from the little that I've tasted it, it could probably be there for me. Again, same thing with you.
Hmm.
It's right. I mean, that profile is fantastic. I just haven't had enough of it where I could have justified really putting it on the list. So I haven't, but yeah, I have. Springbank is my overall number one all around. There's really no doubt about that. But as we talked about in what would have been what 2 episodes ago, the number 11 through number 20, Ben Nevis and Kleinlich from a ceiling standpoint on any given night can, especially Kleinlich, I think, in terms if you're talking about possibly passing Springbank,
Hmm.
it would probably end up being Kleinlich overall if that were to happen.
Sure.
Just because I absolutely when Kleinlich is good, I absolutely love it. Ben Nevis, I'm addicted to the 1996, especially if they're more bourbon cast forward. But the 10 years good enough to it's really good as well.
Mhm.
So, but I guess I was going to mention this before I got rolling here, but a lot of the reason why I struggle is because depending on how you come at this, right?
Yeah.
It can completely change, right? If I'm trying to make a top 10 list for my viewers on YouTube in order to guide them towards the most affordable, accessible, good value whiskeys, it'd be a completely different top 10
Hmm.
than if I'm going to base it off of just ridiculous stuff that I've gotten to try over the years. And that is completely inaccessible to most people. Probably it might be even be inaccessible to me at this point. Um, but so that's where I started to struggle because I can get to like 7 or 8, I can't remember, and then I run into the same problem. But I have Springbank,
Mhm.
I have Ben Nevis and Kleinlich on my list for sure. And
Sure.
again, yeah, if we're talking ceiling, they're top 5, they're top 3 probably. With the one contender that is on the list, no matter what way we look at it, is that's Bruichladdich. Um,
Yep.
I mean, we talked about the range that they have, their versatility, and their ceiling is really really high as well. Um, Especially if you're fortunate enough to be able to try some of the older stuff. Um, let's see. One that I struggled with, and these aren't in any particular order at this point,
Yep.
but I know we talked about this a lot. The Isle of Arran, La Granza. It's not something you've connected with, but
Not
I've
yet.
had really good experience with it overall. It might not have been in my top 10, but I got a bottle of the 10 recently, as I mentioned, and I've really been enjoying it. Their new 18 is fantastic. I've had a couple store picks that have been really good at like 9, 10 years old. I never tried any other Macri or any other peated stuff, but at this point, I'm kind of like Aaron's probably in my top 10. Um,
Okay.
it's kind of a sleeper for me. I mean, even for myself, like I
Hmm.
forget about it sometimes. The 18 is currently on hiatus. The 17 doesn't appear to have come over to the States, which
Right.
is, I guess, a bit of a special release. Maybe it did, and it just got snapped up right away, and I didn't notice it. But um, Aaron, I think all around is one of these. It's hard, and it also has a high ceiling. I'm not drinking it right now, but I have this like 24-year-old single cask from Nichols and Perks,
Mm.
and I mean it's fantastic. It's heavily sherried, but it's fantastic.
Nice.
And even their 21 is still like 250 here in the States, which is a lot of money, but it's one of the cheaper 21-year-old whiskeys you're going to be able to find. But yeah, anyway, I think our Aaron, it was hard for me to keep that one out. Bunnahabhain, I put it in my top 10 because here's the main reason I put Bunnahabhain in, because I was thinking I haven't had enough of it to really love it. I've had a couple of the 12s. I just got an 18 finally.
Nice.
You sent me probably some of either the cash strengths or I'm not sure if you got any of the other ones or not, but
Yeah, I've sent you the 12 cask strength and the Toy Chickaga,
Yeah.
the peated special
It-
release.
and Bunnahabhain is a beloved distillery by many, so it's almost like if you don't put it on the list, people are going to get mad. But here's why I put it on the list. As we mentioned before, I'm not a huge like sherry forward whiskey lover. I like it. I thoroughly enjoy it, but it's just rare that it ever does anything that grabs my attention, even older stuff. However, Bunnahabhain does that. It's the one where it's heavily sherried or relatively heavily sherried, and it does something different that grabs my attention and makes me love it. So I give that whiskey all the credit in the world for doing that.
Yeah, it's kind of
Um,
funny. That's kind of like my Edgered spot.
yeah,
I kind of have the same. I've got the one super heavily sherried distillery.
yeah, yeah. Deanston, and Deanston's kind of in the same boat as some of these other ones where I'm like, man, I've only had the 12. I just started drinking the 18-year-old. I've had the 20-year-old sherry from a few years back, but I haven't really explored some of the more special offerings and things. And even the 12 is really good, but it doesn't necessarily do a thing that makes it like completely stand out.
Mhm.
It's just really good. And the 18 so far is like a better version of the 12 slightly. So I've really struggled with whether that should even be in the top 10. And at the end of the day, I did because the consistency, and I'm liking the 18 and that 20-year-old, uh, again, that 20-year-old sherry cask blew a door down that very few other whiskeys have been able to
Mhm.
do in the sherry category.
Mhm.
And some of it might come from trust from some of the rest of the community of how much they enjoy some of these other cask influence versions. But that's one that could get knocked out.
Okay.
But almost out of respect for it, I put it in there.
Yeah, I have even less Deanston experience than you do, so I just
Yeah.
haven't had enough to put it up there.
Yeah, that was kind of one of my arguments for it as well. So it could fall out. So I think the other one that I haven't mentioned, Ben Romick. Again, it's another one that I waffle on. Like I have had some absolutely fantastic Ben Romicks, even at younger ages. So that's what carried it. But and it's like I need to drink some more of it to get like fully on board. But I was trying to think of something that I liked better and from what I have had, and the list is very short. So
Mhm.
again, it's almost like a reluctant placement on the top 10, even though what I have had is good. It's I can't defend its position that well. Maybe that's it. Like if you question me on it, I'd have to just like wilt because I don't have the ammo. And then you mentioned Daff Mill, and we kind of talked about this as we were going through the list. Daff Mill, Daff Mill makes some of the top 10 best whiskey in the country, I think. I haven't had a lot of it, but man, the stuff that I have had is, and it's not old. You know, you had the bottle of the 15. That's the oldest one I've tried.
Yeah.
The first batch of the 15 at least.
Yep.
And so we're really sitting in that 11 or 12-year-old age range, and what they're doing at 11 and 12 years old is just
It's crazy.
fantastic.
It's crazy.
But availability for us to buy a bottle, it's like $250 minimum,
Yeah.
basically most of the time, unless you get lucky.
Yeah, that's the only reason it's not in my top 10 is I feel like I need one or two more unique experiences from them to kind of make
Yeah.
sure I have enough of an understanding. But yeah, from the few I've had, it's incredible. Such a heft, like that. It's like the heftiest young spirit.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
it's so thick. It's crazy.
Yeah. I have it there now because there aren't many other distilleries that have given me anything close to the experience that even the couple hand, probably less than a handful of Daff Mills that I've tried. have done. So, and given, and yeah, some of the story, it's like two people on a farm, just basically their hobby, and it's unfortunate that that there isn't more of it. But if
Yeah.
they'd have to hire more people, and then maybe it wouldn't be as good. But
And then,
anyway, like that's what's set. Now, there's a couple that did you notice any that I didn't mention yet?
Yeah,
That you
that I would expect.
would expect
Glengyle. I'm
again?
surprised you haven't said Glengyle yet.
Yeah, I thought about that one a lot. And
Yeah.
some of those distilleries that I said, well, I need to taste more.
Mm.
Glengyle could absolutely take their spot. But I thought about it, and I don't love the 12 as much as everyone else. I've kind of talked about that before.
Mhm.
I like it. There's nothing wrong with it. It just has not been a wow moment that I've had with a lot of these other 10 or 12-year-old age statements. The 16 was my whiskey of the year last year. It was absolutely delicious. And I've had at least one or two of the others. I think there was maybe 2 batches of 16s prior to it, maybe 3.
Yeah.
And they were good. But this was the first one last year's that was like, oh yeah, this is good. And the 8-year-olds are kind of up and down for me. Like I like them all, but whether they're special or not, like there's a couple of them that I've had most of them at this point that are really good, and then the rest are like, yeah, that's good. So I was really thinking about it, and I'm like, and I haven't been a big fan of the heavily peated.
Yeah.
So it's just that's another one that hasn't clicked with me quite yet. And given how much I love Springbank, it's kind of weird for me not to say Glengyle's in my top 10, not in my top 10 or whatever. But I've had good experience with it, but only a couple great experiences, and I've had a lot of Kilkerran. So it's had a bunch of chances to be great, and for the most part, it's usually pretty good.
Okay. Fair enough.
I think that was what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so I talked about 9. I think Deanston was one that, in terms of what I have on my spreadsheet, I have not marked. Because Ardnamurchan's another one that could be on the list.
Mhm.
Again, I almost feel weird doing it because it's number 2. We talked about like
Yeah.
and stuff. I just love what they're doing. They are making good whiskey. And
Yeah. That's
are they?
fantastic.
Yeah, you'll have to listen to that episode. Craig Ellicky is one that could be in here. The 13 is very good. The 17 is very good. The 23, I'm still I just opened a bottle that I got a few years back. I saw how much that costs now, like $400 or $500. It's like, okay, I think I got it for like 200 a few years ago, and I could have bought more of them, and I didn't. But because it was $200. I mean, there's only so many.
Sure.
It's only a cart full of $200 bottles of whiskey wasn't on the menu at that point. But I mean, Edgewood is on the list. We've kind of talked about that. I do really like Edgewood.
Oh, you do have it on the list. Okay.
Well, it's in my top 16, let's say.
Oh, in that kind of honorable mentions list. Okay.
Yeah, it could be in number 9 or 10. All these distilleries are kind of jockeying for number 9 or 10. Yeah, Edgewood, I love what they do, and they do make really good whiskey. It's just right now I've kind of my palate hasn't been in line. So
yeah. Do you have any heavily peated distilleries anywhere near your list?
So I was thinking about that.
I was curious.
I do have Tobermory. Again,
Okay.
same as you. Like, I think they make excellent whiskey. I do enjoy the 10. By the time this is out, my review will already be out. I gave it a 7 out of 10, which is the same thing I gave Ardbeg 10. And I think a lot of those 10-year-olds, Islas, that's kind of where they're falling, which is very good whiskey. I really like them. I've warmed up to them a bit.
Was it as reluctant of a 7 as your Ardbeg was?
It was kind of the same. It was like I basically said I view this and like the Port Charlotte 10, and even kind of like the Lefroy 10, a lot of those versions of whiskey. I haven't had a Lagavulin 8 yet, but that they're on par with each other, and it's just a matter of style as to what you prefer. So they're probably all going to get. I mean, I think part of me is like I'm rating them too high. I should have gave them 6s, but I can't. At this point, okay, I'll re-review them next year or something. It doesn't matter. It's not that big of a deal. But yeah, Lechik is probably the closest one. I do have Kilhoman as well.
Okay.
In my top 16, so that would be the other one. Similar to you, it's I've really been enjoying them lately.
I was curious where you were going to have Kilhoman if you liked them quite well enough to get it out there.
And then another like ceiling distillery that probably maybe doesn't hit the ceiling as often, but Mortlock could be absolute make stuff that could absolutely be number one. But I could also say Highland Park does. I could also say that Talisker does. Like all of these distilleries are capable of making fantastic whiskey.
Yeah.
So, and if you take some time and really get to learn a distillery and figure out maybe the vintages that work, the cast types that work, the independent bottlers that know what they're doing with that particular distillery, I could see all of these being in people's top 10s because every single one of these distilleries has whiskey in their warehouse right now that would bring tears to our eyes. So
100%.
Maybe it's whether it's 30, 40 years old, who knows, but they're all capable of it. So there was one other underrated distilleries like Altmore. That's what I'm drinking right now. Altmore 18. I guess they discontinued the 12-year-old. I don't know why. I was like really thinking about trying to track one down. But the 18 is another really good one. I always forget that I have, and then I pour it, and I'm like, this is pretty good.
I think you've sent me that once in a blind, and I think that's all the Altmore I've ever drank. So,
yeah, it doesn't do anything wild. It's not crazy, but it's got a very fruity, not quite that tropical dirty, but it's close. And maybe some of that kind of peach Glen Murray flavor that I was getting before on the 18-year-old. But yeah, those last couple spots, it depends on my mood, depends on my week. And even some of the other ones that are on the list, Coela could be on there. Glengarry could be on there. Glencadam could be on there. Glen Scotia, I'm comfortable with it not being in top 10, but top 15, sure. And like I said, Highland Park ceiling is incredibly high. So I don't know. It's really hard. It's not that big of a deal, but I also take it seriously. I want to be confident in my choices, and it really became a struggle because part of me wants to just put Mortlock in the top 10. And it's like, yeah, at the end of the day, it is kind of like one of my favorite like pet distilleries. It's just too hard to find really great ones. And when you do, it sucks that their core range is so far away from, it's like Bamore, right? That their core range is so far away from what it can be, that like even just the style of whiskey it actually makes. It's you kind of got to throw your hands up and just like, okay, I don't know what to do with this, but
absolutely.
Let's see here. We are at an hour and 10 minutes. So we've gone through our top 10. How useful, if you were a new whiskey drinker, you barely know anything.
Yep.
Is this, if I sent you this list of distilleries, is that helpful to you?
I definitely lean towards yes. I do think this would have been nice to have something more like this like a few years ago when I was getting into it, because especially for somebody who like me who got into the hobby, who I went from in a very short amount of time, not drinking any whiskey at all, to within maybe a year and a half, considering myself a burgeoning enthusiast. Um,
Yeah.
we kind of both sort of trickled on it a little bit, and then I think you got into it obviously a bit earlier, but especially COVID hit, lockdown hit. It just kind of worked out that me and you were like, hey, let's start doing Zoom calls because we have nothing else to do. And then we started drinking whiskey and so forth, so on and so forth. So I went from nothing to I need to learn as much as I can as quickly as I can. And then like especially those first few times going into like a Binny's and there's a 30-40 foot long aisle with different names, different and you just kind of look at it like a blank slate. It's like I don't know Macallan from Springbank from there's names on bottles. To have something to start with and be like, okay, let's keep an eye out for these top 10 names and see what I can find and discern from this sort of narrowed scope, and then learn from this and develop out. Now, is it best for a new player or for a new drinker to start drinking Springbanks and Benromics and stuff? I don't know, but I just know from an experience standpoint of okay, where do I start?
Yeah,
it can be a useful tool. Now, if you're, whether or not you're starting in the right place, that could maybe be a different discussion. But
well, I totally agree with you. I think, like, yes, it's a good like one-stop shop. I mean, first, if you're a new drinker, you might not know that this is what this is, right?
Yeah.
So, and then behind each distillery name, there's a lot of context that is missing from just this list.
Sure.
Any list that you look at is just going to be like, you don't know if you like sherry or bourbon casks, or if you like peated or unpeated, or do you like high proof, low proof? I think with most new, you kind of brought it up, but like most new drinkers, like there's the idea that you need to start them out slow. I kind of disagree, because if they don't drink spirits anyways, it's going to be hard for them no matter what.
Mhm.
And 40 and 46% isn't a big enough difference in ABV to matter that much. So, like, yeah, you might not start them out on Lefroy 10 cast strength, but like Tanya, who didn't drink when we started dating at all, still doesn't drink much, not because she doesn't want to, but because she can't. But hi, you'll be listening to this, so she gets excited when she gets called. Although this might not be something she wants to get called out on, but she, I was like, when I first got into whiskey, I'd like make her do like whiskey tastings, basically, like, hey, like try this and try that. It was just an excuse I wanted to interact with somebody pretty much at that point. And I think I got a picture of her holding her two winners up, and one was a cast strength Balcones single malt, and the other was a Lefroy 10. Those were her two favorites out of like the 6 or whatever that we had. And I was like, this is for someone who orders everything as mild as possible. Never drank until, well, not never drank, but like very rarely ever had any alcohol at all. And, I shove like whiskey thinking that, oh, this will be funny. And then she picks like a 60% ABV Balcones and a Lefroy 10. And it's like, okay, well, I guess we gotta, she's serious about this, I guess. But so, and obviously she's very supportive, but she doesn't have her own whiskey collection or anything like that. But those are the ones she picks. So you don't have to start them out on Glenmore and G10.
No. Yeah, and then shoot, continue. I had a point and then I forgot it. So
okay,
maybe I'll remember it. Go ahead.
But yeah, so as far as a beginner, again, the names are good. You need to like look into see what these things are about, and that's where it's good on the website. It has the reviews button, where it will take you. It'll take you to a list of all the reviews on the page.
And then another again, sort of thing of context that's kind of missing is, Bowmore's on this list, and again, the experience, as we've talked about, the experiences you can get from Bowmore are as wide of a range as that exists, really. So, just the distillery name may not, especially for a new person, they might just run out and buy, Bowmore 10, and maybe they'll like it. I'm not saying that, especially if they're new, that may not be a bad thing, but they may not be understanding exactly why it's on the list. So there's absolutely context issues kind of all over the place. Again, it kind of depends on the person whether or not that context matters, or if they're just looking for a place to start. They just want an organized list of, let's try this stuff from a community. I can see that being useful.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, it's, again, is it for everybody? No, I think absolutely it's not.
Is it useful for you?
Like now?
No, currently, yeah.
No, probably not. But like, I think where I'm going to draw maybe use from it is, future snapshots.
Mm-hmm.
If because I'm not reading every whiskey blog, I'm not watching every whiskey reviewer. So if in 3 or 6 months or whatever, all of a sudden, Glen Turret has jumped 15 spots. Okay, let's look into this. Well,
let's
why
check
is
out what's
that?
going on. Yeah.
It can help me, find out trends that maybe I'm just not witnessing, and I can kind of explore that. So in that sense, yes. But am I now, am I making decisions off of this list? No, I'm not. No, I know enough at this point. I know what I know, and I don't think this list is hiding any information that I need, that I'm missing to continue my journey. Yeah, I think I'm kind of past that point for needing that kind of assistance. So
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think we kind of talked about a couple instances of like nudges, like Loch Lomond, like maybe I should take some time and try to figure out if this is but I didn't need this list to tell me that, I guess. Like you're saying, I watch other content and stuff like that. So it's been on my mind. But yeah, maybe this is an extra nudge to say, if this is flirting with the top 15, top 10, maybe I should grab a bottle of it at some point. But I do agree with your assessment. It'll be good going forward to identify maybe things that are improving or coming out of the shadows.
And I think that might kind of highlight kind of like a bigger thought about just like the format of the list itself. I think the format of the list of the sort of generic grouping of 10 distilleries as opposed to ranking is, I at least in my mind, that format will highlight trends a little bit better. And I think that Ardnamurchan is kind of something I can point to as evidence of that. Of like, we hypothesize that Ardnamurchan's probably not number 2 on people's ranked lists, but enough people, like, it's trendy enough that enough people are probably just slipping it in at 8, 9, or 10 or whatever. And it's going to have like a bigger impact of sort of trendy in the moment, what's kind of going on currently. Whereas I think if people were ranking these 1, 2, 3, 4 through, whatever number they decided to rank them on, I don't know if Ardnamurchan would come through quite so apparent that this is something that's happening right now in the theme. So I do think the format is good for that.
I mean, you pointed out a great example in Leg where, again, we haven't gotten to try it, but there's a lot of people that have that are saying like this is good. And it's available. It's a cost that's about the same as Ardnamurchan does. And for whatever reason, either Ardnamurchan, they've been out a little bit longer, I suppose. That's probably their one advantage. But yeah, what happens when lag gets trendy? And does it take any thunder away from Ardnamurchan, or maybe never gets trendy? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, Isle of Raasay is up here in the top 40, which I mean, a round of applause for them. Like I said, like the first bottle that I got was enough for me. Where Ardnamurchan, I was like, oh, I want to drink more of this.
Hmm.
Isle of Raasay is like, I'll check back in a couple of years, sort of thing. So,
Sure.
um, which is fine. I'm not upset about it. I'm excited about what they're doing there, and they have such a crazy like still setup. They can basically do all sorts of crazy stuff. They can like just reroute the spirit all over the place. I don't know. But anyway, what they're doing is really cool. It's just I had enough. Some of
Yeah.
their single barrel stuff is interesting because you have to go through the peated and unpeated, and then they have 3 different casks.
Casks. Yep.
So sometimes like that's almost like selection shock or paralysis because like, oh, I don't know which one to get. Which one am I going to like the most? So
Yeah.
and I don't want to buy 6 of them. I don't want to buy all 6 single caps or whatever.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah, if you want to try them all, you gotta get 6 of them.
Because they're like $100 some a piece. It's like, and they're only 4 years old, 5 years old, whatever. And
Yeah.
it's like I'll just wait a couple of years, I think, on them and let it happen. But like Torvik just released a new, like a sherried version of their, I think, chapter 3 of their Legacy series or whatever they're calling it.
Yeah.
Seems like that one's getting a good response, which isn't surprising, right? Sherried peat, it's always going to probably do pretty well.
Hmm.
Lockley is splits, like the people that love it. People like me who've had it and thought there was nothing wrong with it, but yeah, I'm not gonna buy anymore for a while.
That's where I'm at. I've got one bottle, and it hasn't.
But anyways, yeah, the new distillery thing will be interesting because
Yeah.
it feels like so much of that is who's talking about it, like who's letting us know that this 4-year-old $70, 60-pound, whatever, 65-pound bottle of whiskey is worth it. Because like Isle of Harris came out, I know like Holyrood, and there's been a whole bunch of them. I think Ballandolic, did they just release like yesterday or something like that? And Ardnaho just released one, I think, today.
Yep. I heard
So
that.
I know a lot of people are excited about Ardnaho being on Isla, but I'm sure those first couple batches are gonna be collector's items. So I don't know what they're selling them at. I'm sure it's people probably know at this point. I didn't look, but it'll be interesting to see. I would use it for that. I think is
Sure.
if a new distillery just shoots up out of nowhere, and it's like, oh, and I hadn't heard about it, heard about why. Then I'm gonna go look at least, see what's up with it. But like Dornick, again, I'm sure they make fantastic whiskey. I think about getting into the ballots, but they're expensive, and I don't even know if they're full-size bottles or not. And I was just like, nope. For shipping to work, I have to buy multiple bottles, and I'm not gonna try. It's like this. I'm not buying $600 worth of whiskey right now. It's just not happening. But,
experimental new stuff.
Because I look through what they have available, like I want that, I want that, I want. I mean, I have no problem filling up the cart, but and that's not even saying that I'm going to actually win a bottle of the one that's causing me to place the order in the first place, because it's a ballot, right?
Yeah.
I got the one ballot I've entered, I got a bottle. So now I've got $500 worth of whiskey that I probably wouldn't have ordered otherwise, and I didn't even win the one that I wanted.
Yep.
But yeah, anyway. Let's see. I had a couple other questions here that I written down. Let's see if any of them else.
Sure.
Any other options seem to make sense for us to talk about here. Do you see? So we've talked about. One thing that I wanted to point out. So there is some usefulness here, but you kind of said that it's kind of useful for new people, but not really. It's not really useful for you either, but maybe kind of sometimes. So it could beg the question then, at least from your perspective, my perspective, whatever, like what's the value in it? But then the next question is like, okay, well, maybe there's not a ton of value other than having a fun conversation about it. I mean, that's value. We can, it's gotten 10, 11, 12 hours of content out of me. and you.
Mhm.
But are there negatives? Can you think of a negative of this existing, like maybe pushing someone away from something that they might like because it's not, oh, it dropped 10 spots, I'm not gonna buy a bottle of
Yeah,
it.
I mean, absolutely. I think that's always kind of a risk. I don't think it's a particularly worryable issue yet, only because, at least at the scale it's at now, the people who are like know it exists are like right now. I think it's the hardcore whiskey drinker. They're the people who are voting on it and see the list most regularly are up to date. They know what's going on. They get it. They're the ones placing all these votes and everything. Now, obviously, it is getting bigger every day, and I think the more sort of new people that it finds, yeah, we'll kind of see if they're. Well, I guess we won't see. We won't know, but I could certainly see it being okay. And it's going to be kind of this interesting, even balance of like, are new people going to see the list and realize that there's 150 distilleries or whatever there is, and be like, okay, top 40 is good, or are they going to be like, oh, that one's 27.
Mm,
That one's, why isn't it in the top 10? I'm going to stay away from that because it's 27, where 27 is actually pretty good,
yeah,
considering all the options. So um,
yeah.
that's an issue. Again, I still think the majority of the people who find the list and see it are in the know, and I don't think that it's harming anything yet. A maybe a bigger concern for me is over the long haul, how they're going to like maintain the list. If they're going to just literally tabulate votes from now until eternity, and if Bill goes on there and places his vote now, never touches it for the next 5 years, are all of those votes going to stay on there forever? Because if so, I think over time you're going to have a nothing will ever change because there's so many, you know, if you have votes over 10 years and none of those people, like none of the votes are currently even modernly relevant,
Yeah.
um, and you get 10, 15,000 votes over time, how many more people have to like move is it going to take to move things up and down the list to have like a relevant conversation? Um,
Yeah, it seems to me that hopefully, and they haven't come out, and I don't know if they've actually said this. I don't think so. But that if after some 2, 3, 5 years, whatever it is, they can see which email addresses haven't updated or changed their vote. So they're gonna, and they can send out like, hey, update any ballots that, update your ballot because we're gonna cut out the stuff that um maybe just logging into the thing will kind of flag it as being relevant.
yeah, as long as they do something like that, I don't have a huge amount of problem with. Um, but yeah, I think risks are going to be grow bigger the more eyeballs kind of get on it. But
So the bigger it grows, so let's say, because
I
I
think
think they said that since maybe it was on the last well, they did a one of their podcasts, I think they mentioned it, and then I think Roy mentioned it on one of his VPubs that they're close to 1,500 votes now. So this one was done at 1,050. And I thought maybe that 1,500 was a good point. And obviously they can kind of see how the numbers are fluctuating. So maybe they're waiting for it to be a meaningful change, or I'm not sure. We'll see.
yeah,
But um when this if this becomes super successful and gets passed around, and it eventually there are 5,000, 10,000 plus 20,000, 100,000, whatever it is. This list can get pretty shaken up, and
mhm,
from even maybe from possibly somewhat of a non-enthusiast standpoint,
yeah,
right? Maybe people are just, maybe they'll have to deal with all of the the angry emails like, "Where's Johnny Walker?" or something like that,
yeah,
and so that'll be interesting. I don't know if it's a negative, but like it could get to the point over time where it's completely useless for us, and then as enthusiasts, we could look at it as being bad for new
Yeah,
drinkers
yeah,
because Macallan's number one, Dalmore's number two. Again, it's not that they make terrible, horrible, disgusting whiskey, but like we all know that like that's not
they sell terrible, horrible, disgusting whiskey.
well,
It's not made that way, but that's how they sell it.
well. I
Not
mean,
always, not
yeah.
always, but
I mean, it's drinkable. It's not like it's so other than that, Hart Brothers Dalmore I have, but that's not Dalmore's fault. So so yeah, I like
yeah,
negatives. It's tough to say. Like, yeah, I mean,
it's
as a
almost
starting point,
it's
it's
almost like we don't want it to get bigger because then it's not an enthusiast list anymore
mm,
to a degree. So yeah, I could
that's true.
that could make some sense. Because yeah, I could you could definitely see it sort of warping into something maybe it was not initially intended to be.
It's possible. We're probably a long way away from that, so I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah,
too worried about it.
I'm not
But
concerned about that by any stretch of
it's
the
a
imagination.
possibility. But yeah, and I'm happy that it's on Dram Face now, and like I said, it can kind of mitigate that that potential echo chamber that sometimes gets lobbed at stuff that comes out of like VPub or Ralphie, some of these larger channels, like the Oswas. And the argument or my argument always is like, yeah, sometimes you can see the things that are,
Mhm.
but then there's always some stuff that's not, right?
Yeah.
It's like like Johnny Walker makes like best blended malt nomination every year, and I mean never wins, but there's always some interesting choices that kind of come out of nowhere, and those are always kind of fun to deal with. But kind of getting it out there, kind of getting it out of that corner of the internet, because
Mhm.
I've mentioned this before. What I've learned is there's a bunch of corners of the internet,
Oh yeah,
and if you go
absolutely.
look for them, you can find opinions on pretty much anything for anything. Um, I mean, I mean, even like from channels that are in countries that maybe you wouldn't even think to that you were going to find a whiskey channel reviewing whiskeys or talking about whiskeys, or they're getting completely different stuff than we are, and all that fun stuff. It's
Mhm.
interesting. But I don't know. I'm looking forward to see how this changes. I think. Do you have any other final thoughts before we maybe put a nail in the dram face conversation for a little while?
Not really. I think we've we've kind of covered most of it. One thing that I think is another possibility of seeing something play out, especially as it gets bigger, um, is if it starts kind of expanding outside of the UK. You know, so America gets different bottles and stuff than Australia gets, and versus Spain and Brazil.
Mhm.
So it'll be interesting to see if like anything like shoots up the list because of like an Australian release or something, or you know what I mean. Like it's or like, America's probably would be the best example. It's like it's biggest and it's the biggest country to probably affect these sort of standings, but
But
you could get
by
kind of like
yeah,
regional
by
favorites and
money.
stuff. Yeah.
India and France are like huge by volume, but I think by money, by dollar value or pound value,
Mhm.
however you want to look at it, I think US is pretty
Um,
big, but it's also slow and very regional,
yeah.
and it's it can be frustrating at times.
There's just a lot of like weird, corner cases that you could almost see developing that, but we don't get any of that data anyway. So it'll just be interesting to kind of follow it and see what happens over the snaps. Especially, like, I think the next year worth of snapshots will be kind of fun.
Yeah.
And after that, I think it'll probably settle out. It'll I think be slower to change. Would be my guess. But
What I think will be interesting. So so obviously, at least for the time being, there's a lot of overlap between Oslo Awards, Ralphie and the V Pub, and then and
drum
Dram
face,
Face and this vote, right? There's
yeah.
still a lot of overlap, and it's both of these things are trying to grow and expand and kind of maybe break out of their bubble a little bit, to varying degrees of success, and those will be conversations for later in the year. But the Oswas have made this decision that there's been a couple distilleries or a couple bottles that have won, that basically won their category every single year, the first 3 years.
Quite a few, actually.
Yeah, yeah. There's a number. Aaron 10 and I think Springbank is getting retired as distillery of the year, at least for 1 year, because they're taking a 1 year off.
See, I believe that, so there's 9 different categories. I believe 4 of them have had the same winner every year.
Yeah, Ardnamurchan is best new distillery is getting retired, and
then was it Signatory or Gordon MacPhail?
Yeah, maybe the Signatory has been winning the best independent bottler, which is a very weird category because where independent bottlings are available are so different. But because you take away Signatory in the U.S. and we get Gordon MacPhail, we get like Mossburn, but we haven't had great experiences with Mossburn bottlings. We get some single malts of Scotland with the ultimate line.
The occasional Cadenheads.
Yeah,
we not very much. Yeah,
they'll be like, we get like a wave of Cadenheads once a year. They're usually like 46%ers and stuff like that, which doesn't mean they're bad, but I'm always kind of, it stops me from buying them usually, which is probably a bad idea, but I want cask strength independent bottlings for the most part.
Yeah.
But they do some releases of some more obscure distilleries, like, Glen Ord.
Yeah, I think to your point, Signatory, I think, is definitely the bulk of our.
Yeah. Thanks for pulling us out of that conversation. I appreciate it. Yeah, that's my that's rabbit hole time, baby. I won't come out of that for an hour. So, it'll be. Well, my point was going to be, so there's going to be some replacements for these bottlings and these distilleries for at least a year.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if there's any sort of correlation between the new winners and
when the old winner comes back.
Well, no, and how so we're going to get some new winners. Does that affect the top 40?
Oh, yeah. That could be fun.
Do you see those bump up? And do the Oswas have an effect like that? It'll be interesting to see if that occurs or not. We'll see. But yeah, this has been a really fun exercise. I think it's really interesting. It's made me think about some distilleries differently, trying to really rank distilleries. Again, I don't think that, like, for me, it's a useful exercise to try to rank them. I hate scoring whiskeys too for the same reason. I do it because it's expected of me. But
yeah,
a bottle of whiskey, like I said, every single one of these distilleries can make fantastic whiskey. So if you put a bottle of it in front of me, I'm not going to look at it and say, oh, that's going to be crap. Because it might be the best thing I've ever tasted in my life, especially if it's an IB or for some of these or whatever. So at the end of the day, for me, I guess, like, ranking them and trying to sort these things out into some sort of category is not really useful, because I'm always want to circle back around to a Dalyuan and have another bottle of it. And maybe in the immediate future, I'm not going to go fill my shelf with them, but I want to try everything. I want to be educated on all the different distilleries. I want to try things that are not on this list. I want to, so at the end of the day, I don't think my habits are going to change much.
Yeah. And then to almost kind of bring it full circle from the beginning of the episode, I wish in that follow-up question they had, like, instead of just putting flavor, like, they had expanded on that, like that, kind of like what we're talking about is like best experience possible, consistency, like break down what you mean by flavor, because I think that there's a lot of sort of interpretation there, as opposed to just putting it as one word. Because I think even our discussions have talked about there's 3 or 4 maybe different ways to, and what do we mean by by this experience? Viscosity, that, I think there's a lot of different things in there. Do you like a heavy finish? Like, is that something that you prioritize?
Cask influence versus whatever. You could break it down into minutia, and I think obviously, like,
But I think that's more interesting than asking if I like the attitude of a distillery. Like, it's just,
Yeah, no, I agree. You're gonna ask that one question, and it's kind of a weird. It's got some weird answers to it that aren't you can interpret different ways. So again, I don't know if they're going to be posting that information or if they're just using it to try to help shape maybe some of their conversations that they're having on their podcasts and things, which is possible. That's fine. But yeah, it would be more interesting maybe over time to see if they can keep things like simple. I think the biggest problem with that particular question is it's convoluted and messy.
Yeah.
So it's like,
absolutely, it's too simplistic. Absolutely.
draw like who cares? Like, how many people are going to say a visitor experience? Like, there might be one or two, or whatever.
I'm sure,
Maybe
I'm sure there's 5% or less. But
but you don't throw every option you think of. Like, try to make it useful. Like, you could just say overall. You don't have to have visitor experience and team and location. You can just say distillery experience, and people can something like that. I don't know, but shorten that list, and if anything, use it to add some other options. Like, I think that is a good way to try to like break it down. I don't know how to best ask the question, but again, like we've been talking about sealing all the time. It's like, yes, like the best possible whiskey, like, and that's not going to be for every single one of your selections, but or like a Deanston for me is going to be kind of top 10 because I don't think they're capable of making something bad. But I haven't had a Deanston that's been like, holy cow, like this, like, oh, this is really good. And that's been kind of the ceiling that 20-year-old Oloroso, which is a one-time release, will never exist again. That was closer, but that was years ago. That was like 2020, 2019, something that was released. I don't even know at this point. So the old branding and everything. So yeah, I think you could dig into it, and obviously they'd have to be optional. And you'd have to trust that if you make it public, people are going to look at it fairly, not try to read too far into it. But yeah, I think overall, this sort of thing, it's fun. It's good debate. It's good conversation. But I mean, I don't think at any point, even with Ardent Markin being number 2, which, like, I understand what happened, probably.
Yeah.
And maybe some people did have it number 2 overall. And it's like, if that's true, that's fine. That's entirely up to you to decide. I look at it a little bit differently. Can it be in the top 10? Yeah. I'm not going to put it in the top 10 because you already have it up at number 2. So I'm going to do the thing you suggested, like in the first episode. Like, it's not really a protest vote. It's just like, it's too high already. I'm going to vote on something else. So
let's bump up our pet distilleries a little bit more.
I'll throw it at Kilhoman or well, it's like Glengyle. Man, Glengyle, that's one that's still hard for me to look at because I think in my mind, oh yeah, it's number 10. Or that's in the top. That's in the top 10. And the more I thought about it, I'm like, I don't know. It's one of the distilleries that I've drank a lot of their whiskey, and I was like, it kind of
just drink more Blair.
A lot of infield singles, not a lot of home run.
We'll just drink more Blair Athlon.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those distilleries that if it wasn't for you talking about it, I wouldn't. I still forget about it every time. But it's just there's something about it's like Altavania or whatever. Like I think there's probably some massive Altavania fans out there, and I think I've had one really old one I got in like a virtual tasting back when COVID was going on. Yeah, it was like some super well aged 30, 40 years.
Oh wow!
And I don't remember what it tasted like, so I like it's it was either wasted on me or it was kind of unmemorable. But yeah, there's those distilleries that you don't know, and if it's weird though, that's at least interesting. Because if you buy a bottle, you just the last thing I want is for it to be boring. Just be something.
Yeah, I'm on the lookout for weird.
All right, well. I think we have talked about this particular poll to death. I think there's probably another couple hours worth of hemming and hawing and digging at some particular details, but this was meant to be fun. I think at the end of the day, the Dram Face team and Roy and all these people want this to be fun. It's not meant to be some sort of divisive thing that's splitting the community. So, and I don't think that's what it's been, but you do see people occasionally on some forums and subreddits and things make some comments that are really strongly have a lot of emotion behind them for something that you don't. Uh, I don't. There's a lot of things to get mad about, as I've said before. I don't know if this is one of them, but I guess it's your emotional energy. You do what you will with it. But
People out there will weaponize anything they can. So
yeah, I suppose. And they're bored, I guess. But uh, again, I don't think I'll ever take any of this too seriously. But it's fun to debate. It's fun to debate. If my favorite distillery is number 39, it's they're still making. As long as they're still making whiskey, I don't care. But all right, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for going through this exercise with us. Again, if there's a major update to the list and it seems like conversation worthy, we'll be sure to jump on.
Oh, yeah.
But until next time, thanks for listening. Cheers.
Cheers.